he has not always been a pastor. He was an attorney for many years. Then he found Jesus and could not do that anymore. I promise you the lawyer jokes are going to just get better, because in his office I found this book, which is going to be my primary text for the day. What do you say to a dead lawyer? That's actually from his office, and I'm just going to put that aside. I'm teasing about more lawyer jokes. That will be it for the day. You know, he does hold you in his heart. That song you sang is perfect. I know you know it's one of his favorites. But thank you all so much. He talks both with Karen and he talks with utmost love and affection. And this is not good.
It's not on.
Turn it
It's
on.
not on. Okay. You know what? I did turn it on. Is it muted? It was on mute. Okay, we're good? All right. Sorry. Yeah, all right. So I'll have to tell that lawyer joke again, right? But he does hold you definitely in his heart, and they love you profoundly. One of the things that I want to mention to you today is think about times in your life that you have settled. And even the youngest here today have times where you have settled for less than God's best. You've probably heard that phrase, good is best's worst enemy, right? You've heard that? And it's so true. And the text that we're going to look at today from 1 Samuel, I know it's the 50th ordination of Hans, or 50th anniversary of Hans's ordination, but he's going to have to share the spotlight with Samuel and Eli and a man named Ebenezer. Now, have you ever sung "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing"? That hymn, it's an old hymn, and Hans says you've sung it here. "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing." There's a verse in there that says, "I will raise my Ebenezer." Now, how many of you can tell me exactly what that means? You've sung it many times. I don't blame you for that, but today, hopefully, you'll remember what an Ebenezer is, and who Ebenezer is, what the significance of Ebenezer is. But I will ask you, I will tell you that when I asked Hans, I said, now, 50 years ago, what do you remember about that day? He said, I remember we had one of the best pastors, preachers in our movement, a man that I dearly love. He's a bishop, and here's what I remember. I remember nothing about his sermon. I'm just going to close in prayer right now. But he's going to have to share the spotlight with some people in 1 Samuel, though. And think of times, all these people in the book of Samuel illustrate settling for less than God's best. Good is always best worst enemy. I've heard one of the best management tools that we can use for organizing our day is take everything you have to do and organize it in 3 categories. Category A, B, and C. Category A should contain items that you must get done that day. Category B is items that must be done, but not necessarily that day. C is items it's really not going to matter whether you get it done ever or not. And start working on the A's. When you're finished with the A's, go to the B's. And only if you have time, go to the C's. Because they want you to put the best first. Now, how many times have we not done that in our lives? By settling for second best or third best. The nation of Israel did that when they said, give us a king. God's plan A for the nation of Israel was he wanted to be their king, right? And they said, give us a king, and their reason, if you remember from chapter 8 of 1 Samuel, was so that we can be like everybody else. So that we can have a king like all the nations around us. Now, can I tell you, that's always a great reason for wanting something, right? To be like everybody else. Now, how about King David? Remember his story? King David chose Bathsheba, who was another man's wife. That had to be at least plan D or H or Z for his life. Plan A was to go with the lady that God had given him for his wife and not deviate to some other man's wife. So times that you've settled for less than the best grade. Times that you settle, my health, it's not great, but it's good enough. I don't need to avoid that food. I don't need to do any exercise. Times you've settled for less than the best. Maybe it's, this job is good enough. And you know what? God really wants you to go back and get more training. These seeds, I've been using them for years to plant. There's some scientific research that shows there's other seeds that are better. Think of times when you might have settled for less than the best. That's what David did. That's what the nation did. And, it didn't work out. Less than the best marriage, less than the best kids, less than the best career. It's not a good thing. Settling for Plan B was a temptation for Israel. It's a temptation for all of us. Don't settle. I love what Charles Swindoll said. He says, it's never too late to choose the best. It's never too late to start doing what is right. In this story, we see some lessons also about parenting. And I'm not going to delve into that very deep at all, but it's interesting that if you're a parent, this might encourage you. In the Bible, we see tons of examples where a good, godly parent raises an ungodly child. And an ungodly parent raises a godly child. And it says to me that parenting is often more of an art than a science. It's not 1 + 1 always equals 2. Because here's the deal. Eli was an evil priest. And he wasn't a great priest. He wasn't exactly evil, but he raised some very ungodly sons that were also priests. He raised also Samuel in his household. And Samuel grew up to have ungodly sons. In chapter 8, the people come to him and say, you are old. That's always a great introduction to a conversation. Right? You're old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. So we want a king. We're going to settle for less than God's best. Parenting isn't always a straight line, and it's about spirit leading. It's about spirit heeding. It's about spirit needing. So that's just a little bit of a sidetrack. All the main characters in this book have lives that cannot be explained other than the presence of God. That God was very present in their life, that God showed up at strategic times. Every main character in this story. I love what a physician friend of mine who's a missionary in China says. He said, let me live in such a way that the only explanation is Jesus. What a great statement. Let me live my life in such a way that the only explanation is Jesus. I often tell to people I love and to people I barely know, my life would be a mess without Jesus. And then I follow it up with this. I said, if I didn't have Jesus in my life, I would either be in prison. Of course, it would be a white-collar prison, right? I would be in an insane asylum, or I would be dead. He's that important. He's made such a difference in my life. And some of them that know me well, they kind of snicker and say, you don't really mean that. I guess I absolutely am dead serious. Without Jesus, I would be in prison, I would be in an insane asylum, or I would be dead. I'd be a train wreck without him. I print out my sermons and I send them to people and to church leaders, and before I give them, and one lady that is a dear friend of mine, I challenge people. I said, you need to develop your train wreck testimony. How your life would be a train wreck without Jesus. It's a great thing to share with people. She wrote back and she said, I have a train wreck testimony. And she literally drove into a moving train. And you don't have to drive into a moving train to have a testimony that says, my life would be a disaster without Jesus. Lord, let me live my life in such a way that the only explanation is Jesus. These people in this book of 1 Samuel show very definitely what is the Jesus difference. What is the difference when Christ is present in my life? So that's what we want to look at this morning. Some of the biggest warning in the background of this passage is The Israelites were tempted to do something that all of us can be tempted to, and that is to use God as a good luck charm, or have a life that's built more around superstition than spirit. Here's what they were doing, and you might think of ways that you sometimes are resorting to superstition or luck more than spirit and the help of God, the presence of God in your life. And I'm not talking about just four-leaf clovers and rabbits for you, okay? Even saying good luck. I catch myself, now please don't, say, oh, I do that all the time. I catch myself saying good luck to people all the time, but think about it. Does luck really have anything to do with it for a Christian? Does it? Here's what they were doing. They were taking the Ark of God, as you remember, it was a wooden box that only symbolized the presence of God in their midst. And they were taking it into battle, and their lives they weren't living for God. And they believed that just having the Ark with them would lead to victory. And here's the thing that these chapters tell us so profoundly, is that good luck charms do not work. We see that in this story here. Look what we read about in I'm reading from 1 Samuel chapter 4 and verse 3. And it says, when the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, why did the Lord bring defeat upon us today before the Philistines? Let's bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh, so that it may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. Let's take the ark as a good luck charm. Now, here's what we see that in chapter 4, verses 10. It's verse 10 through 11, it says this. The Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other time, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel said, speak to us, for your servant is listening. And the Lord said, I'm in the wrong chapter. That was chapter 3. Chapter 4, verse 10. It says, so the Philistines fought, and the Israelites were defeated, and every man fled to his tent, even though they had the ark with them. And the slaughter was very great. Israel lost 30,000 foot soldiers. The ark of God was captured, and Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, died. Now, jump to verse 17, chapter 4, 1 Samuel. It says, the man who brought the news of that battle reported, Israel fled before the Philistines, and the army has suffered heavy losses. Also your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of the Lord has been captured. And when he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward. He was the high priest of that time, not the greatest high priest. He fell backward off his chair by the side of the road. His neck was broken, and he died, for he was an old man and heavy, and he led Israel 40 years. He was an old man and heavy. He led Israel 40 years. Now, I have been at my church, the same church. I know you're not going to believe this, but remember, I've been there 40 years. I started in junior high school. But I hope that that's not the epitaph that they put on my tombstone. He was an old man and heavy and led Alliance Friends 40 years. He was old and he died at this time. Now, that word heavy, it's the word kabod, and it means weighty. It means glory in some places that it's used. It means influential. He was heavy, but only in the weight sense. In our Friends tradition, we have this term that we refer to very influential people as weighty friends, and it has nothing to do with what happens when they get on the scales. But we call them weighty friends. It's kind of fallen into disuse. Cannot figure out why. There's another term that ladies, you're going to have trouble believing this, but our ladies about a generation ago would refer to regional gatherings of Quaker women, Friends women, as the Wider Women's Friends Conference. Now, for some reason, that's kind of fallen off in popularity. The Wider Women Friends Conference. I can't figure out why that's fallen off in popularity, too. But this is the concept here, but it's even further explained as I read on. His daughter-in-law, after they get this message, the wife of Phinehas, one of Eli's sons, was pregnant and near the time of her delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and their father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains. As she was dying, the women attending her said, "Don't despair. You have given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay attention. She named the boy Ichabod. That second part of that means weighty. It means glory. It means the presence of God. And if you add the ich in front of it, Ichabod, it means the glory has departed. The ark is gone. We no longer have the presence of God. We no longer have the power of God. We no longer have the glory of God. The ark is gone. She named the boy, as she lay dying, she named the boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory has departed from Israel," because the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband, and said, "The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured." Here's what I want you to think of. I want you to think of times in your life where maybe you feel the presence is gone. The glory is gone. The influence of God is gone in my life. It's just, I don't sense His presence any longer. Ichabod. There's all kinds of things that can illustrate that in our lives. Maybe our testimony, we have a vibrant testimony, but it's 40 years old. Or 20 years old. Instead of that fresh love fire that Jesus had to rebuke the church at Ephesus, once a thriving church, but in the book of Revelation, Jesus had to go to them and say, "You've got all these things going to you, for you." In Revelation chapter 2, he says, "But this I hold against you. You've lost your first love." The glory is gone. The presence is gone. The power is gone. Ichabod. Maybe you have friends that are not good for you and remind you quite frequently when things aren't going right in your life. They'll say, "Well, where was God when this happened to you?" That's Ichabod. They're reminding you that the glory is not present. They're not good for you. Ichabod. Do you have Ichabod sons in your life? Things that remind you that the presence is gone. Things that illustrate the presence and the power and the influence of God is missing in your life right now. See, the children of Israel had all kinds of things that reminded them that the presence was gone. They had all kinds of things that reminded them that the presence was there. How many times did they have visual reminders of God's presence? Remember how they were led through the desert those 40 years? The pillar of fire by night and the pillar of cloud by day. That was the glory of God reminding them of His presence. Moses in the burning bush was a visual reminder of God's presence. Remember the story of Lot, where his wife turned into a pillar of salt. You heard about the little boy that got those stories confused? And he said that Lot's wife was a pillar of salt by day and a ball of fire by night. But in the Bible, there were all kinds of visual reminders of the presence of God, that God had shown up. I've mentioned the burning bush. I've mentioned the pillar of fire. I've mentioned the pillar of cloud. And you might say, well, that's Old Testament. What about New Testament? Well, think about Paul. When he had a profound encounter with Jesus on the Damascus Road, it was both a visual, blinding light, and there was an auditory voice that he could hear. What about when the church was born? When the church was born at Pentecost, there were sounds like a rushing wind, illustrating God is here. And there was the tongues of fire, the flames that rested on each person's head.
visual reminders of the presence of God. And that's what I'd like you to think about today. I'd like you to think about times where God has shown up in a visual way, and you need to remember those for the times when you believe that the presence is gone, that you don't sense His power, you don't sense His influence, you don't hear His voice. They are real. They are good. And that is a reference to chapter 7 in 1 Samuel. Let me read that story there. And so in chapter 7, I'm going to pick up that where we see a very different scenario here for the nation of Israel. Look at, with me at chapter 7 and verse 12. Here's what it says there. It says, well, verse 10, it says, when Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, now tide has turned for Israel. Now God's presence has returned in a powerful way. While Samuel was sacrificing the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near to engage Israel. But that day the Lord thundered with a loud voice. He thundered against the Philistines and threw them into a panic. And they were routed, even though the ark is not present with them in this battle. The Philistines have the ark. Their good luck charm is gone. Good luck charm that didn't work anyway. It says it threw them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. And the men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point at Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shem, and he named it Ebenezer, saying, thus far the Lord has helped us. It means a stone of help. And I've put 3 little Ebenezer stones here today. There's 2 little ones that I'm going to leave with you all. And I'll tell you why I'm leaving with you all. Because some of you may need a visual reminder that God has not departed from your life. His presence is not missing. He's not MIA. But His presence is very much real in your life. And the Ebenezer stone was a visual reminder of that. God is with us. His glory really is still here. He's our stone of help. In the Bible, they were always digging wells, piling up stones, and building altars. Why do you think they did that? Because they had a tendency to forget the presence of God was with them. They needed visual reminders. You might say, well, Pastor, aren't you encouraging us to do exactly what you discouraged us from doing, having good luck charms in the beginning of the sermon? You know what? All I can say is they did it in the Bible. It was good enough for them many, many times. It should be good enough for us. And we got to be careful we don't just use them as good luck charms, but as reminders. Hans, can I tell you, I counted all the times where it says remember in the Bible. There's 274 times in the Bible it tells us to remember. Why do you think that is true? That doesn't even count all the times it says don't forget. Why do you think that is? Because we have a tendency to forget the presence of God. That's why we need visual help remembering the presence of God. Thus far, it says, he named it Ebenezer. When you sing Come Thou Fount of every blessing now, next time it says, I will raise my Ebenezer. Now you know where it comes from. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. And so the Philistines were subdued and did not invade Israelite territory again. Wow, powerful. So how do we raise up Ebenezer stones in our life? Can I just give you a few ideas, okay? I've given you some ideas how they did it, visual signs of the Lord's presence. Let me give you some examples of Ebenezer stones. How we can raise them without making them just good luck charms. Prayers. Favorite prayers and hymns like you shared with these folks to share at this very momentous occasion. Those can be Ebenezer stones. Every time you hear them, you're reminded, you know what? I may feel emotionally that God's not with me, but I know that He is. That song, that scripture, that Psalm 146 that reminds us that He is present in a powerful way. I have a scripture. I can tend to the anxious side at times. I don't know if any of you struggle with anxiety, but it's the #1 mental illness in America, anxiety. My medication is meditation on Philippians 4. Verse 6, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present all your requests to God, and the peace of God, which doesn't make any sense, which transcends understanding, will guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. There are times that I just need to recite that over and over again. It can be a memory verse. That can be your Ebenezer stone, like my Philippians 4 is for me. It can be journal entries that you write in a journal. God's showing up in your life. Ebenezer, he was my help in this. And then go back and read it. One of our elders shared just recently in our elders meeting that they go back 1 year every day and share and look at what happened a year ago. And often there's a prayer, and then they fast forward to where they record in their journal how God answered that prayer. That can be your Ebenezer stone. Journal entries. Ebenezer stones can be a circled date on a calendar. Because these dear friends have been in our lives a long time, they know what January 8th means to us. January 7th and August 8th mean to us. January 8th is when our son at age 3 fell into a septic tank and was miraculously recovered. August 8th is when our daughter was given a stage 4 diagnosis of melanoma, and it ended up being a false diagnosis, but only after we agonized for 6 weeks. Those dates circled on the calendar are our Ebenezer stones. Ebenezer stones can be a literal stone, like this one that I keep on my desk. I'm not leaving this one, but I'm going to leave 2 little versions of it with you. And if you need an Ebenezer stone, a literal one, for your desk, I'm going to leave them for you to pick up today. And I guarantee you, you'll remember this sermon today, the 2 of you. Ebenezer stones. How else can we raise up Ebenezer stones? You might think, well, this, I don't really need it. The great missionary, Hudson Taylor, posted a plaque in all of his homes, the same plaque saying, Ebenezer, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord has always helped us up till now, and He always will. A plaque on a wall can be your Ebenezer stone. Award-winning author and pastor Walter Wangerin, I bet you Harper's read some of his books, Walt Wangerin, tells of his Ebenezer stone at his ordination, again, almost 50 years ago. Hans, he and you are about the same age. Here's what he said. His favorite mentor, his favorite pastor, came up and greeted him at his 50th, or at his first ordination, and he hugged him at the close. He said, and when he hugged me at the close of my ordination ceremony, my face burned. Here's what he writes. Somehow, I took that facial heat as a sign from God that He would send His Spirit into my ministry. I will remember that my face burned. I'll save this as a sign, as an Ebenezer sign, that I will be with you. The promise of power from on high, and I was content. Ebenezer stones can be like my boyhood Bible club teacher, Gretchen Lamar. I still remember her having Bible club in the basement of her house. She was frequently a Bible school teacher. And she and her husband lived a life, there's no other way to explain it, a life of sin in their young years. They had a daughter, kept on going in their life of sin. And then they had a baby by the name of Tommy. Tommy would never grow. I remember growing up in the same church as a teenager. Tommy stayed at age 2, even though he was at least 10 years my senior. And people would frequently come up to Clint and Gretchen and say, oh, that must be awful. They had to greatly change their lifestyle. They couldn't run around like they used to. They couldn't go to all their parties, all their dances, all their clubbing that they did before Tommy was born. And she would stick her finger in their face and say, don't you dare sympathize with us. He is the best thing that ever happened to us. Because He showed us how much we need Jesus. He's not an Ichabod son. He's an Ebenezer son. He's an Ebenezer stone. The Lord is our help. He showed us how much we needed Jesus. He's the only reason we're walking with Jesus. He probably saved our lives. See, Ebenezer stones can be Ebenezer sons. What's your Ebenezer stone? Like I said, I'm leaving these two little stones with you today. I would love to pray with you if your life is more Ichabod than Ebenezer. And I hope I've challenged you today how to move from Ichabod to Ebenezer. And to think about the Jesus difference in your life. Maybe Jesus isn't in your life, and I know if he's not, I would love to talk with you. Pastor Hans, Karen, Joyce, a lot of people here would love to talk to you about how to have the Jesus difference in your life. How to have Ebenezer instead of Ichabod. Lord, help us to impart and implant these words from your word into our hearts today and move from Ichabod to Ebenezer. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen.